What if the story of Jesus Christ, the central figure of one of the world's largest religions, has a hidden chapter? A chapter that connects him to two of the most powerful figures in ancient history, Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, and Julius Caesar, the Roman general who forever changed the course of Western civilization. It's a bold claim, isn't it? But it's a theory that has intrigued researchers for years. Cleopatra VII, the brilliant and cunning queen of Egypt, was known for her political savvy and legendary romances with both Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Her descendants held a unique position in history, blending the royal bloodlines of Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Now, imagine a scenario where this ancient bloodline didn't vanish after Cleopatra's tragic death but lived on, quietly influencing the world in ways we're only beginning to uncover. Today, we're diving deep into a theory that suggests Jesus of Nazareth, yes, the very Jesus whose story is told in the Gospels, may have been tied to this royal lineage. Could it be that his family wasn't just fleeing from Herod's wrath when they went to Egypt, but instead returning to a place where they had deep-rooted connections? In this video, we'll explore the possible connections between Jesus' bloodline and the Ptolemaic Dynasty, examining the intricate web of intermarriages, alliances, and power struggles that defined the ancient world. We'll also look at how Egypt's influence on early Judaism and Christianity could explain some of the most puzzling aspects of Jesus' story, from his flight to Egypt as a child to the mysterious missing years of his life. To understand how Jesus could be connected to one of the most iconic dynasties in history, we need to delve into the story of the Ptolemaic Dynasty, a ruling family that reigned over Egypt for nearly 3 centuries. Their story begins with Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander the Great's trusted generals, who took control of Egypt after Alexander's death in 323 BCE. Over time, Ptolemy and his descendants not only ruled Egypt but also blended Greek and Egyptian traditions, creating a unique cultural and political legacy. The most famous member of this dynasty was Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt. Unlike her predecessors, Cleopatra wasn't just a political figure, she was a symbol of resistance against Roman domination. Known for her intelligence, charm, and political acumen, she formed powerful alliances with two of Rome's most influential men, Julius Caesar and, later, Mark Antony. Cleopatra's alliances with Caesar and Antony weren't just personal, they were strategic. With Julius Caesar, she had a son named Ptolemy XV Caesar, commonly known as Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. Caesarion was officially recognized as Julius Caesar's son and heir during Cleopatra's reign. He was groomed as the future ruler of both Egypt and Rome, a living embodiment of the union between the two most powerful civilizations of the time. But after Cleopatra's defeat and suicide in 30 BCE, Caesarion's fate becomes murky. Roman historians claim that Octavian, later known as Augustus, had Caesarion executed to eliminate any threat to his power. However, some theories suggest that Caesarion might have escaped and gone into hiding. If he survived, it's possible that he married into other royal families, quietly preserving his lineage far from Rome's reach. Cleopatra also had 3 children with Mark Antony, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra, Selene II, and Ptolemy Philadelphus. After Antony and Cleopatra's downfall, their children were taken to Rome, where they were paraded as captives. But their story didn't end there. Cleopatra Selene II, in particular, plays a crucial role in this theory. Cleopatra Selene II, the daughter of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, was eventually married off to King Juba II of Mauritania, a client kingdom of Rome in North Africa. This marriage was more than a political alliance, it was a way to integrate the remnants of the Ptolemaic bloodline into the broader Roman world. Cleopatra Selene and Juba II ruled Mauritania, blending Egyptian, Greek, and Roman influences in their court. Their descendants likely continued to intermarry with other noble families across the Mediterranean. Some researchers suggest that over time, this bloodline may have merged with certain Jewish aristocratic families, who were known to form alliances with foreign powers through marriage. This brings us to the heart of the theory, that Mary, the mother of Jesus, may have descended from one of these aristocratic families, potentially linked to the surviving Ptolemaic line through Cleopatra Selene II. While the story of Cleopatra Selene II is well documented, the fate of Caesarion remains a tantalizing mystery. If he did survive Augustus's purge, it's possible he fled to a distant region where he could live quietly, away from the political turmoil of Rome. Some speculate that he may have sought refuge in Egypt's Jewish community, which was significant at the time and had deep historical ties to the Ptolemaic dynasty. Over the generations, descendants of Caesarion and other Ptolemaic heirs could have integrated into Jewish society, eventually giving rise to families like Mary's. This would mean that when Jesus' family fled to Egypt after King Herod's decree, they may not have been escaping to an unfamiliar land but returning to a place where they had ancestral ties. The idea that Jesus could be descended from Cleopatra and Julius Caesar may sound far-fetched at first, but when you start tracing the bloodlines and considering the historical context, it becomes less implausible. The connections between the Ptolemaic Dynasty, Roman politics, and Jewish aristocracy are undeniable, and they set the stage for a deeper exploration of Jesus' potential royal lineage. To understand how a Jewish family like Mary's could be connected to Hellenistic royalty, we need to explore the political and cultural landscape of the time. After Alexander the Great's conquests, the Hellenistic world saw a blending of Greek, Egyptian, and Near Eastern cultures. This created a unique environment where intermarriages between Jewish aristocrats and Hellenistic rulers weren't just common, they were politically advantageous. One of the most prominent Jewish royal families during this era was the Hasmonean Dynasty. The Hasmoneans, also known as the Maccabees, were a priestly family who led a successful revolt against the Seleucid Empire in the 2nd century BCE, establishing an independent Jewish kingdom. Over time, they became a powerful aristocratic lineage, marrying into prominent foreign families to secure their political influence. Historical records show that the Hasmoneans had diplomatic and marital ties with several Hellenistic dynasties. For example, Mariam I, a Hasmonean princess, married Herod the Great, the Roman-backed king of Judea. This marriage symbolized a strategic alliance between the Hasmonean royal line and the Roman-supported Herodian dynasty. During the Hellenistic period, it wasn't unusual for Jewish aristocrats to form alliances with Greek and Egyptian nobility. These marriages weren't just about love, they were political moves designed to solidify power and ensure mutual protection. Some researchers believe that Mary, the mother of Jesus, may have descended from a branch of the Hasmonean dynasty that intermarried with descendants of Cleopatra, Selene II, and King Juba II of Mauritania. Cleopatra Selene's children would have carried the blood of both the Ptolemaic dynasty and the Roman aristocracy, making them prime candidates for alliances with powerful Jewish families. The blending of these bloodlines would have created a lineage with legitimate claims to both spiritual and political leadership, a lineage that Jesus might have inherited. While the canonical Gospels focus on Jesus' spiritual mission, they occasionally hint at his family's elevated status. For instance, the Gospel of Luke includes a detailed genealogy of Jesus, tracing his ancestry back to King David, a revered figure in Jewish history. This emphasis on Jesus' royal lineage suggests that early Christians were aware of, and perhaps sought to highlight, his noble heritage. Apocryphal texts and early Christian traditions provide further clues. Some non-canonical writings describe Mary as coming from a prominent family, with connections to both the Jewish priesthood and aristocracy. If these accounts are accurate, they support the idea that Jesus wasn't just a spiritual figure, but also a descendant of ancient royal lines. Moreover, some scholars point to Mary's visit to Elizabeth, described in the Gospel of Luke, as another indication of her aristocratic background. Elizabeth is identified as a relative of Mary and the wife of Zechariah, a high-ranking Jewish priest. This connection to the priestly class reinforces the theory that Mary came from a family of significant social standing. Another piece of the puzzle lies in the well-documented Jewish communities in Egypt during this period. By the 5th century BCE, a Jewish temple had been established on Elephantine Island, and by the time of Jesus' birth, Alexandria had become home to a large and influential Jewish population. These communities maintained their distinct religious practices while adopting elements of Hellenistic culture. They were often led by aristocratic families who had ties to both the Jewish homeland and the surrounding Hellenistic world. If Mary's family had connections to the Jewish elite in Egypt, it would explain why they fled there after Herod's decree. Egypt, with its historical ties to the Ptolemaic Dynasty and its thriving Jewish community, would have been a logical place for a family with aristocratic ties to seek refuge. More importantly, it suggests that Jesus' time in Egypt wasn't just about survival. It may have been a return to a familiar and supportive environment. This blending of Jewish and Hellenistic bloodlines sets the stage for a deeper understanding of Jesus' identity. He wasn't just a figure of faith. He may have been part of an ancient aristocratic tradition that sought to unite different cultures and religions. By examining these connections, we begin to see Jesus not only as a spiritual leader, but as someone who may have carried the legacy of ancient dynasties in his blood. Now that we've explored the potential aristocratic and royal lineage of Jesus through Mary's connections to the Hasmoneans and Hellenistic royalty, let's turn to one of the most intriguing aspects of his story, the family's flight to Egypt and the mysterious missing years of Jesus' life. According to the Gospel of Matthew, after King Herod ordered the massacre of all male infants in Bethlehem, an angel appeared to Joseph in a dream, instructing him to take Mary and Jesus to Egypt. On the surface, this event appears to be a simple story of a family escaping persecution. But what if there's more to it than meets the eye? Could this journey have been more than an escape? Could it have been a return to a place where they had deep-rooted ties? Egypt wasn't just any foreign land. By the time of Jesus' birth, Egypt had a significant Jewish population, with Alexandria being one of the largest Jewish centers outside of Judea. This Jewish community was well-established, wealthy, and politically connected. It had grown over centuries, starting from the time of the Babylonian exile and expanding during the reign of the Ptolemies. For a family with potential ties to Jewish aristocracy and perhaps even the Ptolemaic Dynasty, Egypt would have been a logical and familiar place to seek refuge. Instead of fleeing into obscurity, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus may have been returning to a region where they had ancestral connections and where they could find protection and support among powerful Jewish families. This idea changes the entire perspective of the story. The flight to Egypt wasn't merely about survival. It was about returning to a place of safety, a place where their lineage and status could shield them from Herod's wrath. By the 1st century BCE, the Jewish community in Alexandria was thriving. This community wasn't just made up of ordinary citizens. It included influential families who played key roles in trade, politics, and religious affairs. The Jewish aristocracy in Egypt often maintained close ties with the ruling elite, blending their own traditions with Hellenistic customs. One of the most prominent examples of this blending is the construction of the Temple of Onias, built by a Jewish high priest who fled to Egypt after being ousted from his position in Jerusalem. This temple, located in the region of Heliopolis, served as a religious center for the Jewish population in Egypt and symbolized the deep-rooted presence of Jewish traditions in the land of the pharaohs. If Mary's family had connections to the Jewish elite in Egypt, this would explain why they chose to flee there, rather than to a neighboring region like Syria or Arabia. Egypt wasn't just a place of exile. It was a second home for many Jewish aristocrats. One of the great mysteries of Jesus' life is the period between his childhood and the beginning of his ministry. Apart from a brief mention of his visit to the temple at age 12, the Gospels are silent on his whereabouts until he appears again around age 30, preaching and gathering followers. Traditional interpretations suggest that Jesus lived a quiet life in Nazareth during these years, working as a carpenter. But if we consider the theory of his aristocratic lineage, another possibility emerges. What if Jesus spent these years in Egypt, receiving an education that prepared him for his future role? During this time, Alexandria was one of the greatest intellectual centers in the ancient world, home to the famous Library of Alexandria and a melting pot of ideas from different cultures. It was a place where Jewish scholars, Greek philosophers, and Egyptian priests exchanged knowledge and debated theology. If Jesus spent his formative years in such an environment, it would explain his profound understanding of religious philosophy and his ability to engage with both Jewish and Hellenistic traditions during his ministry. In addition to philosophical teachings, Jesus may have been exposed to the traditions of divine kingship, the idea that rulers were chosen by the gods and endowed with special powers. This concept, deeply embedded in both Egyptian and Hellenistic cultures, could have influenced how Jesus viewed his mission and how his followers later interpreted his role as the Son of God. If Jesus was indeed descended from an aristocratic or royal bloodline, it's possible that his time in Egypt wasn't just about survival or education. It may have been about preparation. In ancient societies, young members of royal families were often trained from an early age in politics, religion, and leadership. They were groomed to take on roles that required both spiritual guidance and worldly governance. This raises a fascinating question. Was Jesus being prepared for something greater than just a spiritual mission? Could his time in Egypt have been part of a deliberate effort to equip him with the knowledge and skills necessary to fulfill both a religious and political role? While the Gospels focus on Jesus' spiritual teachings, early Christian traditions and apocryphal texts suggest that there was more to his story than what the canonical texts reveal. These writings often depict Jesus as a figure who possessed secret knowledge and who challenged both religious and political authorities of his time, traits that would be consistent with someone trained in the traditions of ancient royalty. When we piece together the clues, the flight to Egypt, the thriving Jewish aristocracy in Alexandria, and the mysterious missing years of Jesus' life, we begin to see a picture that's radically different from the traditional narrative. Instead of a humble carpenter's son, Jesus emerges as someone with a potential royal lineage, deeply connected to the ancient world's most powerful traditions. If you enjoy our content, we'd love your support. By joining one of our channel memberships, you help us continue creating videos like this one while gaining access to some amazing perks. As a member, you'll unlock exclusive content available only to supporters, earn loyalty badges to show off in comments and live chats, and enjoy priority responses to your comments, shoutouts, and more. The best part? Memberships start at just $2.99 a month, less than a cup of coffee. Even small contributions make a big difference for the PJ Bible TV team in covering production costs and delivering the content you love. And if you're not ready to become a channel member today but still want to support us, there are other ways to help. Engaging with our videos is a tremendous way to show your support. By taking just a few moments to like the video, share it with friends, family, or on social media, and leave a comment, you're telling the YouTube algorithm to share our content with more people. Your support, no matter how you choose to show it, means the world to us. Thank you for being part of the PJ Bible TV community.